at a global level, the business sectors that are most vulnerable to this, those sectors that often rely on low paid, low skill. And then if I want to break it down further, we would say construction, the apparel sector, the agricultural sector, increasingly logistics and factory work, and then what we call those businesses that are cash economy around that. So those are your main sort of headline areas.
Welcome to Podcast and Business. I am Juan Carlos Giraldo from Boston, United States. Modern slavery can affect any business, sector, and supply chain, which is why we must be vigilant. There are many fields where modern slavery could occur, such as construction, agriculture, hospitality, and also the restaurant business. In this episode, we have as a guest Andrew Wallis. Andrew is the founder and CEO of Unseen UK. This organization provides assistance and training to both individuals and businesses to mitigate the risk of modern slavery. Also, we will discuss how modern slavery is related to ESG, environmental, social, and governance. Hello, Andrew. How are you? Thank you for being my guest in this episode.
Hi, Juan Carlos. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
No, thank you so much. Andrew, this episode is particularly interesting because, I am a very sensitive person when I see, read, or hear about this subject that we will discuss in this episode, such as modern slavery. And even more thing is present in business. Sometimes it's hard to believe. So I would like to start this conversation by asking you, how will you define the term modern slavery in business?
I think the easiest way to help our listeners understand what we're talking about is that modern slavery is an illicit commodity trade, but the commodity happens to be a human being that is bought and sold and exploited for vast profits, and the chances of a perpetrator being caught and punished for their crime is very, very small, less than 1%. And because it's an illicit trade, it is not restricted by the rules of the law of the land. It doesn't pay taxes. And when it looks at legitimate business, the illicit trader is trying to insert their commodity into your business or extract from your business illegal profits, whether that's directly through the exploitation of an individual, a human being, or it is by creating the environment where you are ending up paying for something that is built on the backs of slave labor.
Thank you for this definition. Speaking about that, when I take the Unseen UK course on modern slavery in business, which I recommend to the listeners, what caught my attention, Andrew, was the enormous annual profit that this horrendous business has, and which reached pretty much $150 billion. So speaking about that, what are your thoughts on how modern slavery has revenue combined Amazon, Google, and Netflix? Well, this was something insane that hard to believe, by the way. What are your thoughts about that?
I mean, my first thought is that figure is, and I know it's in our training, that figure is nearly 10 years old. And this year we saw the release of what's called the Global Slavery Index, which is an estimation of, and it will always be a very, it'll be a conservative figure of what is the scale of modern slavery today. So it has upped the figures in terms of the total numbers from 40 to 50 million in the last 5 years. So that's a 25% increase. And 28 million people in situations of forced labor within the private sector. I would say now, actually, that if you want to put a figure on it in terms of what's the profit from this illicit commodity trade, we are probably approaching somewhere north of $500 billion profit per annum. So that, you've got to add a few more companies into Amazon, Google, and Netflix to get anywhere near that. And that is money that is not in the legal financial systems, but at some point it does flow into the financial systems and structures of the world.
And you know what? I was watching some YouTube channels, and every 4 seconds we have a person who is entering this business, being a slave in these years. Speaking about organizations, Andrew, we know that investors use ESG information to see if a company has any kind of risk or they are doing the right thing. In your opinion, how can the goals and values of ESG help to reduce or eradicate modern slavery? I'm asking you because the modern slavery term came up to me. Believe me, I was not aware of that when I read the book Towards of the Future by Helen Jorgensen, when you were mentioned that in one chapter. So what is your opinion? How meet the values of ESG and how the most important help and reduce or eradicate, I hope, the modern slavery in business?
Great question. I mean, the ESG is a means by which we are trying, and when I say we, collectively, we're trying to assess, are there positive impacts that companies have on the environment, the social, and governments? And by getting a good score, it's the hallmark of a good business. I think the problem with ESG is I define the S as somewhat slippery. And what I mean by that is we haven't yet developed the metrics by which we can say this is the S is for. However, I think it's going to come because I think the investor community is really fixated on this issue now. And also we're seeing a raft of legislation around the globe. So just this last week, the EU has announced that following sort of the lead by the US is that it will ban goods coming into the European Union and within the European Union that are tainted by forced labour. In the UK, where I'm based, we're going to see an upgrade to the Modern Slavery Act, with a new Modern Slavery Act, which again is going to put increased regulations on businesses saying these things are really important, tackling modern slavery and tackling these social issues. Why it's important, and in terms of sort of goals and values and eradicating modern slavery. The ILO developed the principles of decent work. Where those principles are adhered to and where companies are doing the right thing, it is increasingly difficult for forced labor exploitation to take place. The big sort of, if you like, what's the big elephant in the room? The big elephant in the room is procurement, because sadly procurement is incentivized on one thing and one thing only, and that is profit. And when you try and squeeze as much extractive, or what I think more accurately call exploitative profit out of the system, you create the perfect environment for exploitation to take place. And so, I think we're not there yet. If you're not, as a company, really looking at these things, and the way I would define it is, your stance as a company should be when we find modern slavery. There isn't a sector or a geographical location where modern slavery doesn't exist. So when we find it, this is what we're going to do. But most companies, unfortunately, are still in the if we find it, then we might think about some things to do. But by then it's too late.
Right. I would say therefore, the ESG reports are crucial. What I read about it, for example, is that in terms of ESG, is many banks may receive deposits from companies that have modern slavery in their process. So also the supply chain is a crucial part of that. Before going to the next question, Andrew, why these situations occur in modern slavery and business occur with citizens of Eastern Europe or the Balkans? Any pattern that this situation has? Perhaps the poverty on these countries? Why is the majority of people came from the Balkans or Eastern Europe, in your opinion, to work, let's see, in UK, where you are based right now?
The sad fact is it constantly changes. And I think what you're getting at is what are both the push factors and the pull factors. And at the global level, the push factors, grinding poverty, conflict, climate change, back to ESG, disasters and persecution. So for a lot of people, they are faced with, what we call Hobson's choice. Your options are poverty, 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 or risk everything to go and take a job the other side of the world. And even if you know that there are risks around modern slavery, human nature kicks in and people say to themselves, well, it happens to everybody else, but it won't happen to me. And the trap is sprung. So that's the push factors. The pull factors, at a global level, the ever-increasing gap between the rich and the poor, whether that's at a nation state or an individual state. And people are looking as to how, for some people it is literally a matter of survival. To your specific, why Eastern Europe into, say, the UK or into Western Europe, it was economic. It was primarily around being able to earn more in the West than you could at home. And so you went in order to support your family in that whole process. And the trap was sprung. And then, the pull factors was unfortunately the demand. And this, if you say what drives modern slavery, it is our demand, particularly in the West, but demand is anywhere, because slavery happens everywhere. It's demand for cheap labor, cheap services, and cheap goods. And so that insatiable demand is met by an ever-growing vulnerable population group.
Interesting insight, Andrew. Andrew, what industries, in your opinion, are leading this modern slavery business? When I took the course again in UNC, UK, seafood, agriculture, construction, can you elaborate a little bit? What are the main industries that that join or have this kind of situation?
Sure. I mean, at a global level, the business sectors that are most vulnerable to this, those sectors that often rely on low paid, low skill. And then if I want to break it down further, we would say construction, the apparel sector, the agricultural sector, increasingly logistics and factory work, and then what we call those businesses that are cash economy around that. So those are your main sort of headline areas. And so that is not to sort of allow our listeners to think, oh, phew, I'm not in those sectors, therefore it doesn't apply to me. So I think we would say any sector is vulnerable to this. I have spoken to, everything from really high-tech sectors, all the way through to the other end of the spectrum, who have all had incidents of modern slavery. And it isn't just within your supply chains. It can also be where, if you have a business model where you subcontract, so it could be catering or security or cleaning or even building your factories and your warehouses, to restaurants, to car washes, etc. So it is something that is prevalent everywhere.
For example, as an individual, learn more what kind of patterns any kind of business has. For example, it was very interesting that unusual transportation, or early in the morning or late at night, in a van with full of people who doesn't speak English, relocated many places, hiding some modern slavery in particular situation.
Sure.
Andrew, let's talk about Unseen UK. What is the primary role and purpose? Now we are living in a purpose world, How is helping executives and companies and also the society to face this problem of modern slavery? Because I am in the ESG business, and I would like to know your thoughts. How it can help to companies to face this problem?
Sure. Why we exist, and we've existed for 15 years now, is we exist because we are working towards a world without modern slavery. I think none of our listeners want, once you've got over the shock of hearing that slavery is still alive and operating, none of us actually want to live in a world where people are exploited and people are nothing more than a mere commodity to their exploiters. So we exist to end modern slavery. How do we do that? We do 5 main things, and then I'll focus in on the business one for our listeners. So we work directly with survivors of human trafficking and modern slavery. We work with law enforcement and what we call the blue light agencies, or the statutory agencies, helping them understand that they are dealing with victims, how to best identify and work with them and share intelligence with them. We run the UK's Modern Slavery Helpline, which is a 24/7 helpline that has been running for the last 6 years, which is for victims, for frontline workers, for the public, and for businesses to call, whether they are in a situation of exploitation or they have concerns or tip-offs as to what's going on. That is now outside of government, the UK's largest data set in terms of what's happening in terms of modern slavery. And then we also work with businesses, and we take, and I'll come back to businesses in a minute, but we take all of that, what we call our frontline work, and use that information and that data to work with governments, our own government, but governments around the world, to help them develop better policy and legislation and implementation. Specifically with businesses, so building out from the helpline, we have built a business portal that businesses can join, where we can share intelligence with them, where those businesses are named, where there are suspicions of, or there are incidents of modern slavery taking place, so that they can work collaboratively with us and with others on the portal to address those issues. And what we can bring to the fore is making sure that the victims are protected and put to the fore in the whole process. But what it also gives businesses is that trend and risk analysis of how modern slavery is developing and how it's been found across there. And it creates a safe and confidential environment for businesses to work together that want to tackle modern slavery. Then out of that, we've built a business hub, which again is for businesses of all sizes and all sectors, to help one another, work with us, because we're sort of the subject matter experts in the room, to understand the risks of modern slavery. What does it look like for a business that wants to go down that path so that it is resilient to modern slavery, that it is on a when we find it stance than an if stance. And, in that hub, they receive regular webinars, newsletters, trend analysis, training that is drawn from our real-time work on the front line. We then also offer training to businesses, either that's role specific or generic, so that everybody in the business can access it. So that is a mixture of face-to-face or e-learning training. We work with the business so it's applicable to that business, so that they are aware as a business, they know what to do when they find it, how to safely report it and deal with it.
Right.
And it is constantly updated with what we're seeing from the data. And then two final things. We offer consultancy. That's everything from the C-suite down in terms of building on 15 years of experience of dealing with this, how to strengthen and put in place a continuous improvement program in that business. But what we bring is an understanding of the risks, the methodologies that traffickers use, the routes that traffickers use. And doing that gap analysis for them. And then for some businesses, we are increasingly being asked to run grievance or speak up mechanisms, whether that's speak up helplines, or now we're offering a service where we can do worker voice at scale, in the tens of thousands, where we can ask workers across the supply chains, across any geographical area, what is really going on, analyze that, and then feed that back into the business so it knows what is actually happening on the ground. So it's all very well having a policy and a statement, but is that matched up with practice on the ground? So that's an overview of what we do.
No, that's amazing, and I think everything starts from inside of the company. You create awareness of what's going on. The employee experience has to speak up if they see something. Let's say again, like in the supply chain. Andrew, before wrapping up, is there anything that you would like to add to this conversation, probably to CEOs or executives that are listening us around the world, how they can identify maybe allyship, like your company that probably they discover or find that they're having this kind of situation? Please feel free.
So I think a couple of things. Firstly is get over the issue of, is this happening? It is happening, and it's real, and it will impact your business. I often say in business conferences, look, the issue is not, are we guilty or not? Let's get over the guilt thing. Let's work out how we're going to tackle this effectively. I think, and then the second thing is to say, actually, there is an increasing body of evidence that if, as a business, you do the right things, so you adhere to the principles of decent work, that you pay a living contextualized wage all the way down the supply chain, it does a number of amazing things. Not least, it reduces vulnerability to exploitation, but it also begins to tackle things like child labor, productivity, and quality. So actually, it becomes a win-win-win for you as a business. So actually, really press into doing the right things there. And then thirdly, and the final thing is, if you've got to the end of this podcast, the problem is now you know about modern slavery, you can no longer claim that you don't. And so then actually the question then changes is to, well, what are you going to do about it? And three quick things that you can do. One is get more people to listen to this podcast, tell your friends and family about it, and then work out what you can do at both an individual and corporate level to tackle that. Secondly, support NGOs like Unseen and others, because they are doing the hard lifting in tackling these problems. And then thirdly, challenge your business and the businesses that you work with to become part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Exactly. Great 3 points, Andrew. Where people can contact you, where people can reach more information about your organization, please feel free to share the webpage or where people can reach you out, please.
Yes, the website is unseenuk.org, and there's a contact form on there. So, if you want to contact me directly, just use the web form, stick my name on it and Juan Carlos's podcast on it, and then we'll join the dots. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, Andrew Wallis, Wallis. So connect with me there, and also connect with Unseen on LinkedIn as well, and all other social media platforms, and just follow us so you become more aware. I challenge you to support us so that we can carry on doing the work that we're doing. And so that ultimately, our mission statement is to put ourselves out of business. And what that means is that we no longer have modern slavery in the world.
Yeah, it's true. We cannot permit, Andrew, that human beings use them as a commodity. And to our listeners, I will say, I highly recommend to the course of UNC in UK about modern slavery in business. I took it and opened really my mind on what is real issue that probably I wasn't aware, and intentional, of course, about this unethical business. Andrew, I would like to say thank you for your time.
Yeah, great to talk to you, Juan Carlos.
Thank you. I'm Juan Carlos Giraldo from Boston, United States. Thank you so much, everyone.